In some cultures, they believe that there are things that live in the forests or jungles that look to lure people to their doom. Creatures and other supernatural entities that can disguise themselves to slip amongst humans. This story from Caribbean folklore is no different. In one of the clearings cut into a massive jungle were working fields. 3 young men crouched down, harvesting, as the sun lowered in the sky, turning to dusk. It was nearly the end of the day, and their minds were focused on their plans after, when suddenly they all, at the same time, turned and looked down the dirt road that ran along the field. They saw a beautiful woman in a dress and a wide-brimmed hat walk down the road towards the jungle. This was an isolated area. No one of them had seen her pass by, but as they thought about this, they couldn't help but stare at her. Even from a distance, all 3 men couldn't stop thinking about her beauty, even without being able to see her face close up. One of the men was married, but was known to be adulterous. 2 of the men suggested they go back to work, but the adulterous man couldn't stop thinking of the woman. He couldn't even take his eyes off of her. And suddenly, the 2 other men's voices faded away, and he started walking towards the woman, at the dismay of the 2 other men. The man walked straight up to the woman, and she calmly turned away from him and extended her hand. He took her hand in his, and they began to walk down the path into the jungle. The path was smooth and well-worn, and the jungle canopy let in shafts of light as they got deeper into the forest. The man could feel the woman's warm hand in his, and her sharp nails on his hand. He felt as though he was in a dream, and he was slowly waking up. He looked towards her to see her face, but her beautiful, naturally curly hair blocked his view. Suddenly, he sank back into that dream feeling, and he continued walking, while continuing to think of this woman's beauty, and what would happen when they arrived at their destination. The woman released his hand and began to walk in front of him, as if leading him. They looked out over the valley as the sun made its final performance. The golden light illuminated the tops of the trees and their hats. For a fleeting moment, the man felt afraid of being in the jungle after dark, but he looked back to the woman, and his fears immediately melted away, and all that was left was desire. The woman continued to walk ahead of him. He admired the way she moved so gracefully through the increasingly thick foliage, her fingertips lightly brushing the ferns as they passed. The man realized in that moment that there was no longer a trail, and that they were just walking through the jungle with nothing guiding them except the woman's confidence in her destination. The man looked back, and all that lay behind him was dark, terrifying, and unwelcoming jungle. He looked forward, and the woman was so far in the distance, he wouldn't have spotted her if it wasn't for her dress bobbing between the trees. The woman turned a corner, and she was gone. The man panicked and started to run to catch up to her, but when he got around the bend, she was nowhere to be found. The man started to wander aimlessly as it got so dark he could barely see 10 feet in front of him. The tree canopy was less dense, and the moonlight illuminated some of his path. Horrifying sounds rang out in the darkness, causing the man to tense up, goosebumps covering his flesh. He was attempting to stay strong, but was barely hanging on to this purpose. Suddenly, he spotted the woman's dress. She was standing among the trees, completely motionless, her back turned to him. The man slowly approached. At first he was relieved, but soon he became more terrified as he realized that she was standing perfectly still. With a shaking hand, he reached towards her as he called out a greeting. She turned to him, and the man saw the most horrifying face he had ever seen in his life. He screamed and stumbled backwards. All at once, the daze that he was in was gone, and he fully felt the terror of the situation as he blindly started running through the forest up the mountain. As he ran, he felt a tear at the back of his leg and looked down to see wild, ravenous dogs chasing him. He wove between the trees, stumbling as he ran. He found himself running along a cliff face as the wild dogs caught up to him. One of the dogs tore at his leg and severed the muscle. The man screamed and tried to turn, but his leg couldn't support it. He fell off the cliff and down to the sharp rocks below. Nobody ever saw the man or found his remains, but if you ask anyone from around there, they will tell you the same thing. It was La Diablesse.